We continue to have Team Hunt versus Team Fornelli, and right now Emory Hunt is leading Tom. It was a rough week 2 weeks ago for Tom Fornelli, a little bit better, but still 5-9-1 is not going to get it done. Conversely, Emory crushed it 9-5-1 to get above 500. And the battle continues. It's not a sprint, folks. It is a marathon. Still plenty of picks to come. So let's welcome in Emory Hunt and Tom Fornelli. And again, the rules are the rules, gentlemen. Whoever had the better week gets to go first in every single game, and that's going to be Emory here. Penn State, which, by the way, Emory's very high on, laying 14.5 at Illinois. Emory, what's the play for you?
I'm laying these 14.5 points for Penn State. The reason why, they have everything that you want in a college football team. They can run the ball. They have two great backs. They have great offensive line and defensive line play. They're able to play any type of game you want. If you want them to throw it 30 times a game, they could do that with Drew Aller. If you want them to run it 30 times, they could do that as well. And that defense, I think, will keep this Illinois offense sputtering. Lay these 14.5 points comfortably with the Nittany Lions.
You know, I'm going to go on the other side of this one because while I've been very impressed with Penn State, and I think they are one of the best teams in the Big Ten, this is their first road game of the season. I think that could present some problems. And as good as they are talent-wise on the offensive line, I don't think that unit has played all that well overall to this point, in spite of the fact that they've won. And on the Illinois side of things, this was one of the best defenses in the country last year, and it's looked terrible this year. But they're not facing the same kind of mobile quarterback that's kind of kept them in place the last 2 weeks. They're also getting their starting safety, Matthew Bailey, back for the first time this season. I'm expecting them to be better overall. I don't think they're going to beat Penn State like they did the last time these two teams met, but I think this game's going to be a lot closer than the spread suggests.
Brett Bielema, by the way, would you show that graphic 9-2 in his last 11 against the number? Let's move on to the SEC on CBS here. Actually, you know what? I got a little bit ahead of myself. False start. Let's go to number 14, LSU, laying 9.5 at Mississippi State. All right, Emory, you're taking Go Tigers and the Bayou Bengals, or are we taking the dogs here?
I'm laying these points with LSU, man. Again, that Florida State game, you throw that one out the window. That's a true exhibition. But in this one, I feel like they are the better team. They have the better quarterback. They are going to play Harold Perkins in the right spot this time. And I feel like that's going to shut down whatever Mississippi State wants to do offensively. I do like the fact that Mississippi State's defense has shown up and they're playing well, in my opinion. But I feel like LSU can still win this game 20-7 and help us cover.
You know, the last 3 years when Mike Leach was the coach at Mississippi State, this is a team that threw the ball 25% of the time. So far under Zach Arnett, they're running the ball, or I'm sorry, they ran the ball 25% of the time. This year, they're running the ball over 60% of the time. It is a complete overhaul in how they're playing offensively. And I know that LSU's biggest problem in that Florida State game was in the secondary, but we've seen you can run on this team a little bit, especially with the kind of zone stretch outside plays that Mississippi State's going to be running on in this one. And as Emory mentioned, defensively, the Bulldogs are pretty good. And I look at this LSU offense, and it has been pretty subpar through the first couple games of the season. I don't have tons of faith in it right now. I think the Bulldogs at home in that environment are going to be able to keep this game close. In fact, I think there's an actual decent chance they win this game outright.
Okay, maybe sprinkle a little money line on that. Let's now get to the game that's going to be in the SEC on CBS. You got South Carolina catching 27.5. Number 1, Georgia. Emory, are you going to lay the points, or are you going to grab the big number here?
Grabbing the big number. I don't think South Carolina will pull the upset. Mama and Ray is no fool, but she did tell me, understand when you're playing a great quarterback, and they have one in Spencer Rattler, and this is screaming backdoor cover town. I like the fact that he can work touchdown to check down the passing game. He's someone that is not afraid of pressure. He keeps firing, gets up off the turf, and continues to play hard. And I am not as sold on Carson Beck as a lot of people are. So we may see this one get under this number early and stay that way. But if it gets above this number early, look for that backdoor cover to hit. So take the Gamecocks plus the points.
You know, Emory, you mentioned that Spencer Rattler has proven that he can get up off the floor, and we've had plenty of chances to see that because he's playing behind an offensive line that cannot keep him on his feet. The South Carolina offensive line has been awful this season, and going up against a Georgia defensive front, gee, I can't see that being a problem for the Gamecocks in this one. But more than anything, I know this is a large spread, and over the years, Kirby Smart has not really had a tendency to run it up on teams, even when he's had the chance to. But for some reason, the last 2 seasons, with Georgia holding big leads at halftime on South Carolina, they keep throwing the ball a lot in the second half and putting up points. One might get the suspicion that maybe Kirby Smart's not a big fan of Shane Beamer. I don't know. I'm laying the points with Georgia this weekend.
All right, and then we get to number 11, Tennessee, laying north of a touchdown, 7.5 at Florida. Now, Emory, you and Jacqueline were vibing before this segment, but Jacqueline might be putting on some earmuffs because she's not going to like what you have to say in terms of what side you're picking here, buddy.
Listen, I like points. I like touchdowns. I like the deep ball. I like Joe Milton throwing that thing all over the yard. And what Florida doesn't have right now, which is rare and weird for me to even say these words coming out of my mouth, they don't have explosives. They lack the explosives on the perimeter. We used to see Florida have at least 2 receivers, a tight end that can get down the field. We don't see that now from the Gators, and it's about points in this ballgame. And can you keep up? I don't think they can. And we've seen Tennessee's defense actually show up a little bit this year. So I'm excited to see what they can do against that Florida offense, but like their offense of the Volunteers to really outpace the Gators here. Sorry, Jackie.
Tennessee doesn't have explosives either, Emory. If we look at this Tennessee offense for the first couple weeks of the season, this is a team last year that had an explosive play rate of over 20% in the passing game last season with Hendon Hooker. This year, they're at 12% with Joe Milton. He's averaging only 6.5 yards per attempt. It has not been there to this point. Now, that said, Emory's dead right. Their defense has been phenomenal. It's kind of like a bizarro Tennessee compared to what we saw from this team last year. And I don't see Florida being able to put up many points in this matchup. But I do think that defensively, they will be able to limit what the Vols do and keep this one close, given the home environment. I think this game's going to be kind of sloppy and kind of ugly. I'll take that touchdown and a half point with the Gators.
Yep, if you're with Tom, you'll gladly take that hook. And lastly, we end in Boulder, where Colorado continues to be the story in college football. In-state rivalry with Colorado State. Now, there is a look ahead to Autzen and Oregon down the road, but 22.5 is what the Rams are catching here. Do you worry about that look ahead, Emory, when it comes to your pick?
First of all, I'm chuckling because you show Tennessee's highlights and its touchdown passes. You show Florida's highlights and it's the band in the crowd. That tells you all you can do. I'm going to look at this game in Colorado State. I don't see a letdown because everybody's going to be there. You have 2 pregame shows going to be there. 60 Minutes is going to be there. We might be there. Everybody's going to be there, right? There's no way they lose this game to Colorado State, who's also making a quarterback change. And what I love about Deion Sanders and his staff, and what no one talks about, is that they are self-scout extraordinaires. They understand where they were weak the game before, and you don't see that weakness in the next game. They made 2 linebacker changes against Nebraska. They were able to stop the run better than they did against TCU. We'll see more adjustments against Colorado State. They may blow the doors off the Rams out there in Boulder.
They could blow the doors off them, but I think the one thing we have to think about with this matchup is in the first 2 games of the season, Colorado was the underdog, and it exceeded expectations by a ton. Now we're finding it is more than a 3-touchdown favorite against a team that they should beat. And as you mentioned, Tommy, there's a big game next week against Oregon, and Deion is smart. We have seen him playing Travis Hunter a ton of snaps in games against TCU and Nebraska to kind of set the tone and let people know that this team is for real. I don't know if we're going to see him playing nearly as many snaps against Colorado State, a game in which the Buffaloes should have control of pretty quickly. We might see Shedeur Sanders sitting out much of the second half, and a lot of this team stars, because let's not forget, as good as Colorado has been and looked last week, Shedeur was sacked 8 times against Nebraska last week. Those aren't the kind of hits you want your quarterback to be taking a week ahead of a much bigger game against Oregon. So I'm going to take the Rams in the points.
2 things here before I say goodbye to you guys here, all right? No unity locks, so an opportunity for Tom to come back when we speak next week. And secondly, our producers from Florida State. So that might have been the editorial decision with the Florida video. Just saying.
Just
there.
wait. We're going to get some good
Emory doesn't miss anything, by the way.
Some good ETN highlights against Tennessee, and we're going to use it next week.
Yeah. All right. Tom,
right,
Emory, thank you very much. Let's talk about early edge versus cover 3 essentially as well. The Cover 3 podcast with Tom Fornelli, with Danny Cannell, Chip Patterson, and Bud Elliott. Who can actually win the Heisman Trophy? Plus, big game breakdowns on Vols, Gators, West Virginia, and Pitt, and more. Then there's Sports Line, 6 p.m. over on CBS Sports HQ. I can tell you on tonight's show, they're doing sell, fade, or following in terms of the most lopsided wager of the night. So are we going with the public, or are we fading the public? NFL underdog plays for week 2 and value plays to make the Major League Baseball playoffs. And then there's the SEC on CBS. I was texting with Jenny Dell, who will be on the sidelines. Gamecocks are 1-6 when playing the #1 team in the country. Their only win was against Alabama back in 2010. And Georgia leads the all-time series 54-19-2.